Welcome back to Shadow Shorts. If we've never met before, my name is Jeff Echols. I am a senior advisor and the head of marketing at Shadow Partners. And every weekday I come to you, I bring you a short conversation, Shadow Shorts, a short conversation with an expert or a thought leader in the realm of innovation for the built environment. Today will be no different. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with Mike Brewer. He is the COO of the Radco Companies, and Mike has a passion for leadership. We've talked about this. We've talked about books that we've read and compared notes and shared suggestions. And if you were around yesterday when I was talking with Bill Boynes from our team about change management, I think this is going to be a great basically second episode because we're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about change. We're going to talk about innovation. So, Mike, thanks a lot for being here. I'm looking forward. This is going to be a fun conversation.
I agree, Jeff. I really appreciate you having me on your show.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad that you're here. Now, as I said in the intro, I mean, we've talked a lot about your passion for leadership and some of the books that we've read. I know that, like every organization, Radco Companies has gone through a lot of change, and you're continually looking forward. And that means a lot of things in a lot of departments, obviously. But when you're leading your troops, so to speak, what are the things that you're paying attention to, maybe to keep your finger on the pulse um, and make sure that you're guiding them through change and into innovation as is necessary?
Yeah, wow, it's a big
Good
question
question.
because there's such a fire hose of information that is available to people these days. I think what I really try to pay attention to is uh, a little bit of the bleeding edge, right? What is
Mm,
way out there in the distant future, and then practical application that is a little more near to the horizon. And then in real day application, we do things as simple as books are a passion of mine. I have a book club that we administer with our senior team every Monday morning. We're reading a book constantly, but we're trying to pay attention to what is really impacting our culture and our team members on an individual basis, especially right now in the areas of mental health. And
mm,
because of all these outside factors that have really laid a lot of I guess, weight on people or tax on people as of late. We're paying attention a lot to mental health and how people are showing up in the workplace in service. We're in the multifamily space, so in service of
mhm.
our customer. So I'm paying attention to a lot of stuff, and it sort of is way out there, and then bringing it back to today.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great perspective, and I always, when I put on the consultant hat, there's always the zoom in and zoom out, right?
Mhm.
There's
That's right.
what's out here, or up here, depending on how you want to frame that. But then how do we apply that? And one of the things that we hear a lot is, pick your topic. It could be AI. It could be industrialized construction. There's all these innovations that are happening. All this change or change makers that are in the marketplace, and you know, we have to keep in mind. I think it's okay. AI, fantastic. How do we use that? How do we implement that? What do we do? The Shadow Partners email that just went out last night was about AI and AI policies. At the end of the day, these are simply tools, and the tools somehow affect the people in our organizations. And a big fear, and Bill and I talked about this yesterday, a big fear of a lot of leaders is, hey, what if we implement this, but no one uses it?
Mhm.
Um, and I think when you're focused on leadership, I think about somebody in your position. I think, yeah, I mean, all the noise, all the noise that's out there, necessary noise, distractive noise, all that. How do I funnel that? How do I distill that into
Mhm.
something that's useful and something that's actually going to be adopted into our culture?
That's right. I think at least what comes to mind for me is in this moment, it's always been important, but it's incredibly important anymore to help people see the why behind the
Mm,
what first and
yeah.
foremost, right? You really have to understand. Well, let's even take it a step back. Really define the root problem or concern that you're trying to address with innovation, or be it software solutions or et cetera. Like, really understand what you're trying to accomplish, then help people understand the why behind the what, and get them involved in the conversation in terms of change management or rollout, et cetera, et cetera. And then you implement, and then you leave lots of room for forums and formats where people can give feedback along the way. So the more you can get them interested in what you're trying to solve and to be a part of the solution, I think that is the real key to making sure there is mass adoption to anything you're trying to roll out in an organization.
Yeah. I like the way you laid that out. I mean, to me, as you were explaining that, I thought my next question was going to be about culture. But as you were explaining that, I thought this is how you build that culture, right? If you do that over and over, and it becomes part of the DNA, that's the culture, right? Is that the day-to-day task?
Yeah, I think that's right. It's interesting. It comes to mind for me. I don't know if this fits here, but I'm going to say it anyway. I, some of the most successful leaders understand the concept or the philosophy of picking mission, picking values,
Mhm.
picking purpose, and then repeating that ad nauseum. And only when you start getting sick of hearing yourself say those things or repeating those things are you finally communicating and getting that culture imbued in people's minds. You have to
Yeah,
get comfortable with just constant repetition to create
yeah,
a culture that is embracing innovation.
yeah. Well, that makes sense. And you mentioned the why behind the what.
Mhm.
And before we went live, we were talking about purpose-driven organizations, and I think when we're talking about repeating that ad nauseum, I
Mhm.
often think that if this team understands the why and buys into it, right? There's got to be buy-in, right? They have to align with it. It has to mean something to them. That's so much easier and healthier, I think, um, to have that understanding and to have that buy-in than to because I think you and I have been in situations, and probably anybody that's in the audience here has been in the situation where they had a leader that it was semantics, right? It was just something that a committee had voted on every word of, and this is our slogan, this is our whatever, and we're going to beat everybody over the head with it. We're going to repeat it at nauseum, and it's meaningless to everyone, right? Those are vastly different things, and I think vastly different expectation. Well, maybe not expectations, but manifestation of success, I guess, in those arenas.
That's right. And I think it's right to say that doing this work is a longer road to success than
Mm,
what you just suggested and or kind of laid out there. But it's kind of like value investing, right? You
yeah,
make all these investments in time, money, and resource, creating forums and formats and getting feedback and so on and so forth. People feel invested in it, they feel loyal because of it. And down the road, when that sort of groundswell of investment finally pops, right, your infrastructure is strong enough to endure the ups and downs of the business cycles that are inevitably going to come, right?
right, right,
Versus that flash in the pan, autocratic way of
yeah,
leading, where you're
yeah,
just, creating the words on paper and then sort of force feeding it to people. It just works
yeah.
better the other way, even though it's a little bit slower to get to the result.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the force feeding version of that, I think, is the flash in the pan version is most of the times not sustainable. I don't think.
Correct.
Yeah,
That
when
that's right.
when you're looking out, I mean, we've passed the halfway point. It's August 16th today as we record this, um, so we're past the halfway point in 2023. We're on sort of the downhill slope for this year, and starting to plan for 2024. So as somebody that is charged with and is passionate about leading people, and leading innovation and leading change, because we all know that change is inevitable. It has to happen. Um, what maybe what's your recommendation for
Yeah,
others in the space that are out there that are in a similar position? Go, hey, the ship's maybe missing the rudder a little bit,
right.
we're trying to figure out how to go forward to towards 2024. What do you recommend?
My favorite exercise that I've been doing individually and in a team environment for, who knows, let's call it a decade, um, or more, is the top three. And what I mean by that is, think about the top three things that consume most of your time or energy or resource, whether it be individually and or as an organization. What is sucking the most resource out of your company or out of you? And then put that down on a piece of paper and then think through systems, disciplines, or technologies or other things that you can put against, under the premise you want to get this time back, right?
Hmm.
Is it a system? Is it a discipline? Is it a routine? Is it a piece of software? Is it just collaborating with people that can help you reduce the amount that you're putting into this? And then take it one step further. What are you going to replace now that you have this time back? Let's say you get 3 hours a week back. What are you going to do with that 3 hours in the way of an investment, and then create some expected returns for that?
I like that. That's a great exercise. So you do that with your teams then?
Correct.
When you said personally as well, but
Yeah, we do. I do personally to set my own personal goals, but then we do it as an
yeah,
organization to actually lay out what then ultimately become initiatives for the coming year, and then we break those down into quarters, and sometimes we break them down into even sprints. Even though we're not a software company, we do break things down into sprints
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
that's the way we create the loose roadmap for the out year or the year to come.
Okay. So I take the things that are taking up the most time.
That's right.
My goal is to get that time back,
That's right.
come up with things to push against those, right? The tools, if I can call them that, the systems, et cetera.
That's right.
Um, and then once I get that time back, how am I going to invest that
Right.
into future? Okay.
That's right. In the early innings, I would just save that time, and because I was not thoughtful about, right, putting something against that, like what am I going to do with that time? I just
Right.
often, right, I lost that time again into something that was
Sure.
not
Yeah. Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
So I learned
Yeah.
later on, hey, put this piece in there.
Yeah. You just shifted it over into another bucket that, that didn't have a return. Yeah. That makes sense.
That's right.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It, that would be that it would be interesting to see, or hear some specific examples of that. I'm kind of thinking through that in my own head now, right? I'm starting to do that exercise. Okay, how does that work? Um, what are there any specific initiatives that you can share that have come out of that?
Sure. I'm going to go back 2 years. This one is most pronounced for me, for us, for our organization. We didn't have a standardized way of interviewing individuals that would come into the company. We just,
Hmm.
we had sort of adopted other people's philosophies and concepts for interviewing. But we identified that as a time suck, forgive the language, but the time suck in our organization, because on the backside, we would end up letting people go that didn't really fit the culture. They didn't fit the systems or processes and disciplinary routines. So we sat down and we said, okay, to get this time back, we need to create a real systematized way of doing this. And we need to think through not only behavioral based interviewing concepts, but also motivationally based concepts. And so we blended those two things together to create our own interview process.
Yeah.
And then we went through the training mechanism and the application of that. And ultimately now our turnover rate is down drastically, except for one position, which is really a broader function of the industry. But uh, save that one position in our organization, our turnover rates are drastically less than they were at the time we were just kind of, you know, not didn't have a system in place for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not ironic. I mean, that's what we talk about, right? But you've innovated.
Mhm.
You've innovated and developed that new system, and that's that's the return on the other side. That's fantastic.
That's right. Yeah, it saves us a lot of time now on the backside
Mhm.
because we don't have this constant churn, or the churn is not as prevalent as it was
Right,
back.
right. Yeah, yeah, and obviously it's bigger than just time. There's a lot of resources
Oh, definitely.
that are involved there. Yeah, yeah, that's great. We're headed another month and a half or 2.5 months, I guess, to um, Shadow Summit, October 24th through 26th in Atlanta. And one of the things that we say about Shadow Summit is that this is our time. We don't call it a conference, right? We're not going to get learning units or anything like that. This is a time for people like you, people like me, a lot of the guests that have been on Shadow Shorts to get together and talk about important issues and set an agenda
Mhm.
for built environment. And that could mean architecture, engineering, construction, real estate. Anybody. There are a lot of fields and a lot of people that are responsible for shaping the world that we live in.
Mhm.
And so we talk about setting the agenda for 2024 as you look, I guess even broader than Radco companies, but it could certainly be, Radco or multifamily.
Mhm.
What's one topic that you think should be discussed at Summit? What's something that needs to be talked about and reckoned with and needs to be on the agenda for 2024?
Yeah, this great question. I hope that I'm qualified in some way to answer this. A bit of it, I think, is a little bit speculation on my part, but I think if I think about the built environment and I think about being on the heels of one of the most dramatic things that has ever happened to our society, at least modern day, right? And I mean
Mhm.
COVID. It is, how do you build environments that first and foremost are safe for our health,
Mm.
right? And then how do you build them in a way that is in support of our mental health, right? Because you're in a built environment you're probably inside more than you're outside,
Mm.
right? Unless you're
Yeah,
really
definitely.
intentional about that. But how do you build that environment such that it enhances or enriches your mental health in some way, not just because you're there to work and create toil, which I do think has some good cognitive benefits, but how do you create the community around that? How do you create the collision points
Mm.
within that built environment that give cause for people to come together and not be siloed or nested in an office, but rather out in community, collaborating and having conversation and gesturing with one another, having fun and doing those sorts of things. So I think if I were to boil that down to one word, design is really important as we look forward to the future, not only for multifamily, but for office. God bless office. Hopefully it comes back in retail and other environments. I think we have to really keep mental health centered to that conversation, or at least somewhat centered to that conversation. And how do
Yeah,
we enhance
yeah,
people?
yeah. I agree. I think that's an amazingly important aspect that, as somebody that spent 25 years working in AE firms and designing things, um, I don't ever remember. Um, to, I don't think I'm a little getting a little past the age now, but I don't ever remember a project where that was a conversation.
Mm,
Um, and I think for a lot of years, maybe generations, we've missed the boat on that. So I think that's a really great point, and appreciate you bringing that up. If you're out there watching this, listening to this, and thinking, "Wow, that is something that needs to be talked about," that's just an example. Right? This is just Mike and I having a conversation, sort of off the cuff here, but that's an example of the kinds of conversations that can go on at Shadow Summit, either from the stage or in the corridors. That's what the summit is about: is bringing up the things that need to be reckoned with in terms of the built environment. So I'm going to put a URL up on the screen right now so you can find the website for Shadow Summit. It's shadowsummit.com. It's down the lower left of your screen right now. There is an apply button. Tickets are going fast. It is purposefully intimate. There are only 200 seats available, and many of those are already taken. So hit that apply button and join us at Shadow Summit. And beyond that, Mike, you have a podcast. It's a very good podcast. What's the name of the podcast, and where can people find it?
Yeah, definitely. Wherever you get your podcast, it's
Yep.
called the Multifamily Collective. Yeah, and it is a combination of daily, small little snippets of things that I'm thinking about, 1 to 5 minutes, and then once a week we do a full blown interview session with people mostly in the multifamily industry, but sometimes outside the multifamily industry.
Yeah.
Interview format that's about an hour long, plus minus.
Yeah, yeah, I love the format, the short and the long. It's a really nice combo. So
Mhm.
check out the Multifamily Collective wherever you consume podcasts. And if you want to know more about Mike and his work or his team's work, go to radco.us. That URL is up on the screen right now as well. So, Mike, thanks so much for. We went a little bit more than short, so this is like a shadow medium today. But thanks so much for this great conversation and raising some really important points.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you're here. And for everybody out there that's watching either live or in some time shifted manner, we appreciate you. I'll be back again tomorrow at noon Eastern with another Shadow Short, another expert or thought leader in the realm of innovation for the built environment. So I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Hey, welcome back to Shadow Shorts. We've never met before. My name is Jeff Echols. I am a senior advisor and the head of marketing for Shadow Partners. And the whole reason for Shadow Shorts, the purpose here, what we do here is to bring you a conversation every weekday with an expert or a thought leader in the realm of innovation for the built environment. So every weekday at noon, I bring you a different conversation. And today's conversation is going to be a lot of fun. You may actually recognize my guest today. She has a great personal brand. She's got a lot of followers, a lot of viewers out there on YouTube. Amy Marks is the Queen of Prefab. So, Amy, thank you for joining me today. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
Absolutely, it's great to have you here. So, what we put on this as a title is a convergence of AEC and M, and I think most people out there understand what we're talking about. But we're talking about architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing. And before we went live, we were talking about the fact that industrialized construction, which is sort of the umbrella, I guess, for the convergence of AEC and M, that's one of the most popular topics of conversation or biggest themes for the questions that we get at Shadow Partners. So when you suggested this as a title, the convergence, AEC and M, why that as a title? Why do you focus on that as what you do?
Well, I think, we're seeing industries completely change because, processes have converged, technology has converged.
Mm-hmm.
But I think really what you're seeing because of this convergence of manufacturing and AEC is really business models are changing. So I
Yeah.
think that's the important thing to note, that business models are changing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so I teach pro practice in architecture school at the undergrad and the grad level. And that's one of the things I hit on all the time, right? We've got a lot of students that come in and they think about the traditional architecture firm model. It's a 100-year-old model. And
Right.
my first question is, what around you hasn't changed in your lifetime, right? These are 25-year-olds, right?
Right.
And the answer to that is nothing. Everything has changed in the
Of
course of their
course.
lifetime. So why is this business model the one that we continue to follow? Why hasn't it changed? And so I like what you're talking about there. Business models need to change, right, in
Right.
order to stay relevant. So in your experience and in your focus, right, the Queen of Prefab, I know there's a lot more to it than just prefab, but
Right.
but as you're focusing on this, what are some of the things that aren't talked about enough?
I think really, I mean, what you just said, in some ways, we're still teaching architecture and engineering the same way we did 100 years ago.
Mhm.
And that expected experience. I mean, look, I get up on stage and talk about the fact that you can order a pizza today with more technology, watch it arrive at your door from your Apple Watch. And on a job site, we're calling somebody still to call somebody to call somebody to see if our $500,000 piece of equipment is going to show up. And
Right.
it's really relevant in the sense that 30 to 40%, depending on what research you look at, is the landfills are filled with construction waste. And that's not because constructors are doing that inefficiently or building product manufacturers. That's because we have assumption-based design being taught at the architecture level. You're talking about placeholder data. You're not talking about real ways that things are actually made, because that would just be, we're very disconnected as an ecosystem. And you can't expect architects to know how every single assembly is made and all their adjacencies, and then multiply that by the number of proprietary systems that are out there and expect them to be designing things with real data, right? And because the data has been disconnected and we don't have, look, we're $14 trillion worth of an environment not connected by e-commerce, not connected by real data. You don't have people looking in their design tool, clicking to search content in real time like I do on my iPhone all day for Amazon when I want to buy something. And I think, again, like the expectation is that people are paid on some wasteful practices and business models these days. So I think it's not about couldn't we change and don't we have the technology? It's, are you willing to change your business model to get paid on value instead of waste?
Yeah. Yeah. So what's the first step in changing?
Recognizing that you are dissatisfied with the current state. I would say nobody changes unless they're unhappy with the current state or they have aspirations that they're not able to reach. So I think after that, once you realize that you're unhappy in some way, or then you need to actually have a vision of what is possible. And you need to know what your company wants to be when it grows up, how it's going to make money, what's important to you. Sustainability is obviously important to me. And then after you understand a vision of what you want to be when you grow up, here's where most companies fall down. Then you have to pick one or two first concrete steps of action to get there and meet you where you are today and map that out so that, look, all of that has to be greater than overcoming resistance. There's a formula called Dan Miller's formula for change. That's what I've actually just read out to you. What most people don't realize is the resistance doesn't come from external parties. It comes internally from your own corporation and from your own people. But I think if I really had to say where it falls down is most people don't think about the simple things they could do today and meet their company where they are today and get them on the path to do something for change. So, and by the way, that something is very different depending on if you're an architecture firm or a specialty subcontractor or a general contractor or a big owner, or if you're a building product manufacturer. And I think, look, at the end of the day, we need, informed design with the manufacturing detail, the sustainability detail. And you're expecting to have informed design without connected information. And I think that's difficult right now for people.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about it that way, because having a couple of decades or more experience working in the A's and the A's and the E's,
Right.
In a past life, I know the education, I know the experience, and I completely understand that disconnect that you're talking about. And it seems to me that there's a layer that we need to bring in, the layer of how do we plug these things together? How do we have that connectedness? So if I'm, it would be a much, much, much longer conversation to say we're going to go all the way back to academia and start rebuilding it from there, which may be part of the solution. But if I'm a leader of, let's say, a construction firm, a large construction firm that's going, okay, we've been banging 2x4s together for 85 years as a company, but we understand things are changing. We've got to work to remain relevant. So what does industrialized construction mean to me? How do we, we're beyond okay, we need to change.
Right.
I know we need to change. How do we start to change as our ABC construction firm of, we're a $100 million construction firm. How do we begin to change and work industrialized construction into our mix?
By the way, I have to make this comment only because you work in the A side, that you're like, how do the
Yeah.
contractors change to make this possible? Like, just means
Yeah, exactly.
we went right past design, and like, how do you
Yeah.
build something using manufacturing techniques that I've just made a dumb box out of, and how do you make it a real
Right.
thing that can actually get built? So that's
Yeah.
not lost on me that somebody who teaches on the A side is like, how do
Yeah.
the contractors fix this? Of having
Well,
been a
let's address
contractor
address
myself.
that too. Yeah.
Right, I'm
Let's
just
address
saying.
that too.
So,
That's a great point.
so let's start from the question you asked, and then we'll go back into the
Yeah.
to the
Yep.
AE side. So yes, I
Yeah.
mean, look, you have a lot of contractors. The make information of how we build things, let's face facts, it comes from the specialty subcontractors at this point. The make data is in the MEP, F, structure contractors, all the guys that have where the money is in their fabrication facilities. Those guys have the majority of the make information, plus the building product manufacturers, obviously, from the windows to the generators to whatever has been productized and now manufactured like product. So if you're a general contractor and you truly want to start understanding the data around that make information, look, you've got general contractors right now putting tremendous amounts of money in the content of the models they're creating, not because it's a contract model, not because they have to create the model for like their own purposes. They're creating those models because they have lack of labor, skilled labor out in these places, and they've got to figure out how to do more with less. Right. So what they're trying to accomplish is, how do I do more with less so that I can understand the rules of some of this automated equipment that I can either bring out onto the job site, whether it's Canvas or, Hilti's equipment or roll formers from Howick and, those kinds of guys. They're trying to figure that out because they have less people there. And the larger the assemblies they can bring in from offsite, the less they have to manage, right? And the more time they can spend on the complicated bespoke parts, right? So I think the contractors are figuring out, and then they're also trying to figure out, how do I reuse that data so that it can figure out how to inform the designers who have no idea about how some of these things actually are manufactured, so that later when I'm now in charge of a design build program or an IPD project, or I have some influence, that they can take more of that make data and reuse it so that the architects just don't use generative AI to move pretty spaces around in coarse grained detail of the actual building. But what if you could actually use that same visualization with real things down to the fastener? I always say fastener level detail or the pipe insertion detail. You would want that, if you could, to know what beautiful thing you just designed could actually be actualized the way you saw it. Because right now you're visualizing things that you hope can be made the way you visualize them. And by the way, that's true of lots of designers. That's true of car designers. That's true of building designers. That's true of anyone that's using, coarse grained movie makers, anyone that's using coarse grained detail to visualize. Their hope is that we shouldn't live on hope. We should live on the certainty of the data that we can start using generative AI, that you can actually get what you envision and get paid for that instead of drawing things that will never be built. Right? Like, that's factual.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are good points. And I think, it's the design side, the designers, again, cars, movies, architecture, whatever, they're getting a little bit of heartburn when you're saying that, because there's this, oh, but my creativity, right? But then the business side of it, right? The business model side of it.
Let me ask you, do you love drawing fire stairs? Do you love
No, they don't.
Okay. Do you love drawing interstitial spaces? Do you love drawing racks and risers and behind the wall, above the ceiling, under the dirt stuff?
No,
Guess what? You could actually be freed up to draw the beautiful entries and stairways and openings if you didn't have to draw fire stairs, because that was a manufactured product that you were able to insert in your generative AI that could be made so that you could spend more time, my friends, in architecture on the stuff we want you to spend more time on.
Exactly.
That's the mindset shift you have to make. Stop drawing fire stairs.
That is exactly right. Toilet partitions and the whole bit. Exactly. That's I was interviewing a while back, a year ago, maybe, Eitan Safardi, one of the founders of SWAP, SWAPP, and he said basically the same thing, right? If you're scared of this technology, think of it like this: what did you love when you were in school?
Right.
It was the design. It was these pieces, the ones that you're talking about.
Right.
All of these tools, all this technology frees you up to concentrate on the things that you do best. And I think he said it, you said it. I think that's the perfect argument.
Right. And by the way,
you also,
you also get to save the world. Ready? You don't design something that has to be cut or welded in a different way because it wasn't the most efficient way to do it. 30 to 40% are in our landfills because you
Mhm.
are being asked to design things without really knowing the efficiencies of manufacturing. So, like, look, you get to focus on the stuff you want to do, and you get to save the world as architects and design beautiful buildings. What more could you want from industrialized construction? Really, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point. And so, when we think about, and I think this is, for this conversation, because of the way I set it up, we separated it out for a minute, right? We separated construction and design out, but I think what really is necessary is to bring it back together, right? It's got to be some sort of
Right.
holistic, collaborative relationship. We can get into product of design and we can get into delivery and things like that, but I think that's the way that things have to move forward. So in your work and what you're concentrating on, what's the day to day look like? I mean, what are you, when you're talking to whoever it is, a contractor, an engineer, an architect, you're speaking from stage. Whatever version of your day you want to envision. What's the big message, the big takeaway? I mean, we've hit on a lot of them, but what is the big takeaway that everybody that's listening to this needs to grasp as we move towards the end of 2023?
I would say, the same expected experience you live in your life, your day to day life, not your work life, where technology makes things easier and frees you up to do the things you want to spend your time on. What if you could apply those same technologies that exist today to the work in which you are doing? So it would free you up to do the things in your business that you really enjoy doing and make money at those things. How are we going to look at what's going on with, generative AI and with what's going on with, all these platforms that are enabling data to be used in a different way and cross industry data, right? So, like, what would you be able to accomplish if you embraced some of that technology that exists and that you use every day, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a really great way to put it. I mean, that's you held up your iPhone a few minutes ago. You talked about Amazon, and back to what I asked my students. What hasn't changed? If these students are 25 years old, which to most of us is, it's kind of hard to remember when we were 25 years old. But if that's about their age, you think about their experience and their expectation. And
Absolutely.
why are we not bringing that into our professional work? So I think that's
You
a
want to you want to
really
ask?
great point.
Here's a perfect example. Sorry to interrupt you, Jeff. Here's a
No, go ahead.
perfect example because I know we're running out of time.
Yep.
I asked a gentleman that was at a big manufacturing firm who ran their IT. He happened to be there for a very long time. I said, "What keeps you up at night?" Now he runs all their technology at this big manufacturing firm. He said, "What keeps me up at night is the 29 different kinds of software that I have." Sorry, that's my doodle. He's all excited now. The 29 different kinds of software that I have and all the updates to make sure one of them talks to one another. And I said, wow, of all the things you could spend your time on, I'm like, this is my iPhone. It's updating apps all the time so
Mhm.
that they speak to one another. So that when I go to the restaurant tonight and use 14 different apps to get there, understand what I'm wearing and ordering and do, I never think like, is that updated or not? And are they speaking to one another? Platforms resolve themselves in the conversation that he was having with me. And I was like, you should probably know that someone else is going to solve for that and think about some other problem, right?
Yeah.
Like I would never think in a platform environment that would be the problem I'm personally as an end user trying to solve, right? Like we have to have the same expected experience that I would have on any other platform in my life.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic example, and it's so true. So true. If you're watching this or listening to this right now and you go, hey, I need more of this. One thing I would say is go to queenofprefab.com. The URL is in the bottom left corner right now. That's Amy's website. And you have I don't even know what the number is anymore, but you've got a lot of followers on YouTube as well. It's called Queen of Prefab. That's your channel on YouTube as well, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. You can pretty much Google Queen of Prefab and find me
All
for
right.
sure.
Google Queen of Prefab. Find more. Amy speaks from the stage. She's got her website there where you can find out other offerings that she has. Go over to YouTube, look up Queen of Prefab, and learn more about industrialized construction. And that's a great segue because Amy and I were talking about this before we went live. Shadow Summit. I'm just going to hint at some things. One of the things that I've talked about that's going to happen at Shadow Summit this year are conversations about a lot of the topics that we've touched on today: generative AI, industrialized construction, etc. The reason we call it a summit, and this is the 7th annual Shadow Summit, it'll be in October 24th through 26th in Atlanta. The reason we call it a summit is because it's not a conference that you go to get your learning units. It is a place that you go to connect with other executives, to have conversations that will set the agenda for the built environment as we look at 2024 and beyond. The history of Shadow Summit is that we've set the agenda for electric vehicles, discussions around electric vehicles, around AI. What's it going to be this year? You get to show up. You get to be a part of that determination and have an effect on what the A's, the E's, the C's, the CREs are paying attention to and concentrating on in terms of the built environment, how we design, how we build, how we develop in 2024. So shadowsummit.com is where you can find more info on that. Those tickets are going quickly. It is a purposefully intimate affair. There are only 200 tickets available. I don't know off the top of my head how many are still left. There are less than 200, a lot less than 200 left. So there's an apply button on the page, towards the top of the page there at shadowsummit.com. Hit that button, apply to attend, join us for this conversation, and maybe you happen to run into Amy at Shadow Summit this year. We'll see what happens. So with that, Amy, thanks so much for this conversation. It's a great one. It's an important one. I really appreciate the perspective that you've given us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely a blast to have you here. And for those of you out there, thanks for listening, watching, whether live or in some time-shifted manner. I will be back Monday. Today's Friday as we record this or as we broadcast this. So I'll be back Monday, noon Eastern, with another Shadow Short, another expert or thought leader from the realm of innovation for the built environment. Until then, have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.